Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. My parents are demanding I pay rent and calling me a freeloader just because I have a video game addiction. After that, you know your rights? Okay, go for it. And after that, am I the jerk for letting my daughter and her husband move in with me so they won't be homeless? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets her files deleted. Not if they're backed up to the cloud. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. My parents are demanding I pay rent and calling me a freeloader just because I have a video game addiction. I, 22 female, have been diagnosed with depression and gaming addiction. I hold a stable job making a very good salary, and I've moved back in with my parents to save up for a down payment as well as their general concern over my mental state. To be frank, I have no hobbies other than gaming, and the only social life I have is playing games with IRL and online friends. However, after I graduated university and came back, my parents have elected to smash one of my monitors, cut my Ethernet cord, and now physically taken my PC due to arguments over my gaming habits. After work, I come home and play games until I go to sleep, and over the weekends, I play games the entire day. It's been going on since 2 weeks ago, and they're refusing to give me back my PC, even though my psychologist says that this is doing more harm than anything. They call me childish for not being able to control my own habits despite the fact that I'm holding my job. This has caused me to become more depressed than usual, with my days now often spent 95% of the time with me in bed aimlessly scrolling through social media. I'm back on my antidepressants, and they seem to think that this is the better alternative. I have voiced this opinion countless times, but they refuse to listen to me or my psychologist, and I have a letter written from them. I used to pay a much above average monthly rent for my one bedroom and washroom that I share with my siblings. However, this month I refuse to pay my rent since they're treating me like I'm a kid. And as a kid, they don't have to pay rent. They're now calling me a vindictive jerk and a freeloader because I'm no longer contributing to the household. Edit for info. Some answers to questions I see in the comments. I moved back since I live in the same city, and the logic goes, if you're paying rent anyways, might as well pay it at home to keep the money in the family. I pay for half the electricity, Wi-Fi, and groceries alongside my rent. My rent by itself for a one bedroom, one bath would be considered way above average. However, I still end up saving money because when I live by myself, I do not cook and order takeout. I shower every day when I come home, just not on Saturday. I eat 2 meals a day, morning and night, since I do not like eating outside the house. I don't cook. I have my own schedule where I will eat dinner, but when I feel like it, which is usually after they finish eating. After which I will do the dishes. Laundry and vacuuming the room is whenever I feel like it's getting too messy. I've paid for rent since I moved back, which would be since August of 2022. I've paid for soundproofing of my room so there's less noise when I game. The majority of arguments are due to me not coming down for dinner when they finish making it. What caused them to destroy my properties the 2 times were 1. Not willing to go to my younger sibling's school play, 2. Sleeping in until noon or afternoon during the weekends. You are correct to assume I do not get any exercise, but I get 6 hours of sleep regularly on the weekdays and however many hours during the weekends. Not the jerk. Move back out and do you. Don't leech off them or you would be the jerk. They're mistreating you with the destruction of your own stuff, a better reason to withhold rent. My son went to one of the best psych hospitals for a month inpatient and had similar gaming habits. They told me it's how he socializes with his autism, and as long as he's happy and able to support himself, it's not a disorder. He has a full-time job now, he's 23, and 100% of our family's love and support. We even play with him. You may get a lot of varying opinions or mean comments. Ignore them. No one but you gets to decide how you spend your free time. As long as you're not harming anyone and you're not burdening anyone, enjoy it and don't feel guilty. That ought to help with the depression too. Traditional socializing is overrated. I'm 50 years old and I've learned that most socializing is superficial anyway. The close relationships you have, including those online, are all that matters in life. Not the jerk. You're a grown adult. You have a job and you're actively saving money. And unless they are outside every day cutting lumber or hustling money, when I'm sure they're just probably watching TV all day or playing on their phones as most old people do when they accuse people of being kids, forget them. I'd be calling police for destruction of property, to be honest. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her parents? Please let us know. All I know is I really want to play some Red Dead Redemption 2 right now. Oh man, that game is so good. You know your rights? Okay, go for it. Background. My ex and I were 3 months into separation as I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find what she would accept other than take her back and return to being a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents and understood very early that as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally it was very likely I was going to be paying alimony, and she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preference, it did mean a fair share. It was clear that legally, I would not get an approval for an agreement heavily biased in her favor. So I kept reworking and sending possible divisions. Every few days for months, she would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation into something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so everything went to email only. Through all of this, I had recognized too that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. Not a total doormat at this point though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up her weekly cash flow. I kept paying the bills, but my final offer in this period was the heavily unbalanced offer of splitting the cars 1 to each, me taking all the debt, including her student loans, paying her $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so she could get her feet under her, and she gets all of the stuff. I walk away with my cars, my dogs, some tools, and some clothes. No go, not good enough for her. And so we get to the meat of the story for the malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we've seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily. She balks, but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agree to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalfs to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question, to either of us, results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolve to gray rock her directly and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy, like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk, 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh boy, not true at all. Not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights, so the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawal by her card, over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 in change. You missed a couple zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of papers was rather thick, so I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It is 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up done more here. Not to mention I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. Court date rolls around, I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up and plops herself next to me and starts going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then, to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you are writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement. She huffs a few seats away from me and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it's a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to get us and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech, proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money that I made, because he is just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by, and she asks me if I have anything I'd like to say. She can see the stack of paper and eyeballs it as she's talking. I hand over the stack, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single one. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yen, the court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of the," and gestures to encompass the stack of paper, "needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I knew it was going to be. She didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed and I wanted to be sure the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I didn't want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too, for much the same reason. Also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up. We got the totals, signed papers, I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side-eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying, "It might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you're free to go." I got the hint and left immediately. I had parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I'm obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay. And worked down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then texts from her sister's phone, then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. OMG, even Netflix? I admit I giggled. The fallout wasn't over though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It's denied due to lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payment, just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could, just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point, and we both go to court. She's going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally, asks my ex for proof that I wasn't paying the car payment, as she's holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't, so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I'm holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. The complaint is dismissed. Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. Divorce took another 10 months, lots more crazy, teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support and only about 60% of the debt. I lost my dogs to her though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now. The other is in that range. I still miss them.
Yowza. Stories like this make you think it might not be worth the risk of getting married these days.
Am I the jerk for letting my daughter and her husband move in with me so they won't be homeless? This situation is complicated and I'm at my wit's end. I have 2 daughters who are civil to each other but don't get along with each other. My eldest is married to Steve while my youngest is engaged to Adam. Steve and Adam are so different, they disliked each other the first time they met. Steve works part-time because he treasures family time with my daughter. They spend their time traveling and exploring different parts of the states. He spends freely because he often says he can't take his money with him when he dies. Adam is an executive, and for his side business, he owns several dozen properties. He works about 80 hours a week at both jobs because his philosophy is that he wants to make as much money as possible while he's young so that he can retire early. Steve thinks Adam is a corporate shill and basically blames him for everything that's wrong with society. Steve said that Adam is actively keeping people from buying homes and making them dependent on him. Adam thinks Steve is a slacker and has told Steve people like him who do the bare minimum but expect handouts are what's wrong with society. Neither of them are bad and they treat my daughters well. I retired last year due to my health, so Adam built a house for me so that I can live comfortably. I was able to customize everything in the house to fit my taste. Adam owns the house, pays for all of the utilities, and charges me $1 a month for rent. Part of our deal is that no one else can live in the house but me. He was very clear about this. Steve recently lost his job, so he and my eldest are living off of her single income. As you can imagine, they're struggling. My eldest recently called me crying because their savings are almost gone and they can't make next month's rent. She asked if she and Steve could move in with me until he finds another job. I live on a fixed income, so I don't have money to set them up in another apartment. She's my daughter, and I couldn't let her be homeless, so I let Steve and her move in. I gave them strict rules and a time limit on when they had to move out. I didn't think my youngest and Adam would even find out about it because they live in another state, but somehow she found out. She called and screamed at me last night for betraying Adam's trust, but I argued that I'm a mother to 2 daughters and I can't let one be homeless. I told her about the rules and time limit and begged her not to tell Adam. She hung up on me, so I don't know what's going to happen. I know I went back on an agreement, but I had a good reason. Edit. I couldn't add many details in the original post because I was afraid of going over the character limits. Adam pays the taxes and utilities on this house, but because it's the only house he has in this state, he keeps its financials separate from the rest of his properties. Also, he doesn't really have anything to do with the house. Instead, he gave it over to my youngest to take care of, so she handles all the bills and maintenance and pays them out of an account he set up. She noticed the increased utility costs, which is when she called. We just spoke again, and I laid my soul bare to her. I know I was going back on our agreement, but it was to keep her sister from being homeless. We had a lengthy conversation, and in the end, she agreed not to tell Adam. She'll cover the increased utility cost out of her own pocket so he won't notice it. In exchange, her sister and Steve will have 3 months, then we'll have to move out. I originally told them they had 6 months. I'm lucky to have such a compassionate daughter. Thank you for taking the time to read my post. Some of the comments were very hurtful, but some were helpful. You made me realize I should have called my youngest at the start and asked. That would have saved a lot of tears. You're the jerk. I'm sorry, but Adam is doing you a favor by letting you live in this house, and he gave you one rule, so he's not taking advantage of, and not only did you break this rule, but you did so by allowing the person who insults Adam to live there. Your daughter and her husband want to live by the values they have, fair enough, but they need to be able to have money to back that up. If by Steve losing his part-time job, they're in this much trouble, then they didn't have the money to spend freely and go traveling to begin with. Yeah, you have 2 daughters, but at the end of the day, the person who owns the house has no obligation to house your adult daughter and her husband, and honestly, you. So if you lose your home because of this, then you only have yourself to blame. Well, what do you think? Is OP a jerk or not? Please let us know.
I think when Adam finds out, which you know he will, he's then going to know that he can't trust his own wife to not keep important things from him, or this is going to cause a lot of issues.
My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets, so I made him lose a major client. I'm a huge 49ers fan. The rabid all-day tailgate in the parking lot type. A few years ago, we made it back to the Super Bowl. I was working at a consulting firm with a handful of accounts I would interact with daily. One client in particular knew how big of a Niners fan I was. I was the day-to-day lead on his account. He really liked working with me and we became friends, often grabbing drinks or dinner after our meetings. He had access to a pair of extra company seats to the game and as a thank you wanted to give them to me as a gift. He passed the tickets over to the partner on that account, who I will refer to as Jerkhead Partner, to be given to me as a surprise. The game came and went. We lost. It sucked. The next time we met, we went to drinks afterwards and he mentioned, "Hey, by the way, why didn't you go to the game? I heard someone else was in your seats." I asked, "What game?" He said, "The Super Bowl." Confused, I answered, "I didn't have seats to the Super Bowl." He told me that he gave Jerk a pair of his company tickets for me as a gift so I could attend. I had zero idea what he was talking about. He looked shocked, told me to quietly ask around about it and get back to him. When I was back in the office the next week, I found out through one of the secretaries that Jerk had given a pair of Super Bowl tickets to another one of his clients as a gift from our company. I might have let this sort of thing go to keep the peace under different circumstances, but these were seats on the 30-yard line to see the 49ers play in the Super Bowl. I was ticked. I considered confronting Jerk myself, but realized it was the client who had noticed I wasn't there in the first place, so if I let him handle it, there would be no blowback on me. So I texted him, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for thinking of me with those seats. It appears that they were given to another one of our firm's clients." He texted back right away in all caps, "Are you kidding me?" And then, "Pretend I never told you. Let me handle this." He followed up with me about formulating a plan. A few days later, we were asked to come down for a meeting in their office. The client requested the partner be present, not entirely unusual, so Jerk and I hopped a flight the next week and headed over to their office. Little did Jerk know, my client had orchestrated a wonderfully awkward little show to catch him red-handed. When we entered the conference room, it was all the usual suspects, along with a woman in her 30s we didn't recognize. My client immediately introduces Jerk. "This is Stephanie such and such, VP from the other department. She wanted to sit in on this meeting. Hey, OP, you guys must already know her from the Super Bowl." She then responds as she goes to shake my hand, "Oh, I don't think so. Did we meet there? I'm sorry if I forgot." Client responds, "Gee, Steph, how much did you have to drink? They were sitting right next to you." Client looks at me and I say, "Sorry, I wasn't there. Are you thinking of someone else?" At this point, Jerk is looking visibly uncomfortable, probably trying to come up with an excuse. He starts in with an, when Stephanie says over to him, "No, so-and-so from the other company was in their seats. By the way, I was wondering why we gave company seats to those guys. Is there a project we're working on with them that I don't know about?" Obviously not. They were in completely different industries. It would be like Coca-Cola partnering with John Deere. Jerk lets out an, again, and the client immediately speaks over him, asking, "Jerk, I gave you those tickets for OP." At this point, Jerk is turning bright red. He responds with, well, he wasn't going to be able to make it, so he must have given the seats away to someone else," and turns to me, looking for me to cover for him. Client smirks at me. I respond, what are you talking about?" Client, "You gave me tickets to the Super Bowl?" Client suddenly raises his voice. "Jerk, those tickets were a personal thank you gift to OP. Did you give them to someone else? Was it another client?" Jerk butts in with an, maybe something got mixed up in the office." Client went quiet for what probably seemed like an eternity to Jerk. He then looked down, grabbed his portfolio and iPad, put them into his briefcase and said, "I think this meeting is over. OP, it seems as if I owe you a thank you gift. Let's go to lunch. Stephanie, you're welcome to join. Jerk, I need to evaluate our relationship. Please go back home and expect to hear from us next week." Jerk suggests he would like to join, presumably to do damage control, and Stephanie sternly tells him, "I don't think that's a good idea," and asks for the front desk to see Jerk out. As soon as he's in the elevator, we all break out laughing hysterically. Stephanie wasn't really a VP, just an employee at the company who client had drafted into helping with his pre-planned meeting skit. But she did end up coming to lunch with us and was a fellow Niners fan and a total blast to hang out with. On our way to the restaurant, I got a desperate text from Jerk saying I needed to cover for the firm and that we could discuss things when I got back. I replied, "Yes, we need to talk, but I'll see what I can do." Client told me to wait a couple hours and then respond to him. 1, To expect invoices for the resale value of the Super Bowl tickets, resale is way above face value. It was over $10,000. As well as our lunch, he picked a pricey spot and made a big show of overspending, and that he expected them to be paid immediately. 2. Expected I be given a direct apology. 3. Expected a written apology to his company for what he considered theft. And 4. He will only interact with me or another one of our firm's partners. Never jerk. This whole thing caused a stir with the other partners, and I actually came off looking great because it appeared that I had made a good faith effort to save the client for the firm despite being the victim in the situation. The client would transfer to another partner, which meant Jerk lost his profit share on any work with them. Oh, and the other partners in the firm made Jerk pay the invoices back out of his salary. In retrospect, I really have no idea what the heck this guy was thinking. Did he seriously believe the client would just not notice me not thanking him for the Super Bowl tickets? Anyway, the well was kind of poisoned for me there long term because Jerk wasn't going anywhere. I left the firm a few months later for a much better position. Client ultimately terminated their relationship with that firm a year later. He actually now works with a good friend of mine at a competing firm. I'm still ticked I missed out on the Super Bowl even though we lost. Hoping we make it back this year so I can finally go to one in person. Go Niners. Am I the jerk for not supporting my wife's desire to go to medical school? I, male 35, have a wife who's 34 who stays home to take care of our 2 kids. I am a relatively wealthy software engineer, and I've been trying to be financially responsible to save money for retirement and my kids' college. After getting into a few medical TV shows, my wife has had an obsession with becoming a doctor and has been trying to convince me to pay for her applications to multiple medical schools. I think this is a stupid decision because my wife has been out of her communications degree for 11 years now, and she hasn't even taken the MCAT or anything like that. And if by some slim chance she gets into medical school, her tuition would wreck our finances and cause all sorts of problems with childcare. I tried explaining to her that this decision isn't realistic and suggested that she try to do some other training, like being a CNA, to get a taste for the medical field first, but she got mad at me and said that I'm stealing away her career aspirations. Am I the jerk? Edit. Here's some context for my comments. I told her I would support her taking a smaller step into the medical field by becoming a CNA or a nurse first, because it's more realistic for her to get that position and then advance to medical school. Also, I never forced her to stay at home and do childcare. I do a third of the housework on top of my job, and she asked to stay at home since we got married. She just recently changed her mind. I understand your concern. I don't overly restrict her spending, and any financial rule that we create that is imposed on her is also imposed on me. All large-scale financial decisions over $1,000 have to be approved by both of us to occur. We both can buy necessities and do anything we want underneath $1,000 occasionally. Since her 50 applications exceed $1,000, we both needed to approve, and I don't approve at all. Edit 2. More context from relative things I addressed in comments. Additionally, my wife is refusing to take the MCAT despite my encouragement to do so first, because she thinks studying for it will slow down her timeline. And to those who are suggesting I agree to let her apply to fewer schools, she does not like that compromise. She insists she has to maximize her chances by applying to at least 50. She also doesn't like the compromise I offered of trying another medical career first, like nursing. Not the jerk. Retired nurse here. Ask her if she would apply to nursing school. If she has her bachelor's degree, any field as long as it's a bachelor's degree, she can apply for a 16-month accelerated RN bachelor's program. She can always pursue more advanced degrees if she chooses. She'll soon see how television programs in no way ever reflect reality. There's a huge demand for nurses. But again, she will quickly realize why there's so many positions available. Am I the jerk for yelling at my brother and kicking him out of my house? I'm 28, female, and my brother, who's 33, and I have a difficult relationship, all because I started dating his best friend, 34, male, 8 years ago, and for him, that was an unforgivable betrayal. And I know that to this day, he still thinks the same. That's why our relationship is almost non-existent now. I apologized thousands of times for falling in love with his best friend and for not having been able to fall in love with someone else, but he never forgave me. We only see each other at family parties, and that's it. He didn't attend our wedding and didn't want to meet our kids, who are 6, 4, and 2, when they were born either, so you can imagine how much he hates me. A few days ago, we celebrated our mom's 62nd birthday at my house because hers was being renovated. Well, my mom begged him to come because she's sick and she doesn't know if she will be able to celebrate her birthday with us next year, and he accepted her invitation and went to my house. Of course, since he arrived, he made it clear that he was only there for our mom and that he was not interested in playing happy family with me or my kids. I kept quiet because I wanted my mom to have a good day and ignore him. After cutting the cake, my mom opened her gifts, and one of those gifts was an album of the most important moments of all her kids and grandkids, something that for some reason she asked for a few months ago. And she was so happy with the album that she started looking at all of the photos and showing them to the guests while remembering when she took each photo of us, her kids. In that album, there were photos of my brother with my husband at their high school graduation. My husband was included because he and my brother have been friends since they were babies, so he's like another son to her. And when my brother saw them, he said something like, "What a nice picture. No one would suspect that you would get with my little sister a few years later." My sister, 31, told him to shut up, that he was being rude, but he didn't stop and kept looking at the photos to say things that nobody wanted to hear. So I got tired and asked him to leave my house. I told him that he was being rude and inconsiderate with our mother, that I didn't want him there. And of course he stormed off, and now he thinks that the villain of the movie is me. And the worst thing is that one of our sisters, who's 36, thinks the same thing, because she thinks that I should have kept quiet since it's my fault that he's like that. Am I the jerk? Edit. I don't know if my brother wishes he was the one with my husband, but the truth is that I suspected it many times when I saw how affectionate he was with my husband. Like, my husband had a few girlfriends before me, and my brother hated all of them. But I thought it was just jealousy because he didn't spend as much time with him. But if I think about it, it does look weird. He's in his 30s, and he only ever had a girlfriend when he was 12 or 13. He was always possessive of my husband and overly affectionate, which my husband always hated. So maybe it's true. Maybe that's why I unconsciously apologized to him, because deep down, I knew he was in love with him too. I don't know. Edit 2. I spoke to my husband, and he says that nothing ever happened between them, that they were just friends, that he never did or said anything to make him think otherwise. So I don't know what's wrong with him. I just know that I feel an enormous guilt. If he's in love with him, I'll never be able to feel at peace again. I don't understand. You would think that if two people you loved very much decided to be together, you would be happy for them. Is it possible that your brother had closet romantic feelings for your husband, his best friend? Did your husband suddenly stop hanging out with him completely after he started dating you, so your brother feels like you stole his best friend? Is he single and just a super miserable person? You're not the jerk at all. You did nothing wrong falling in love with his best friend. You both should be treated with respect, regardless of his thoughts on your relationship.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.